bienvenidos a mi canal de YouTube Español por Dentro. Hoy me da mucho gusto invitarle a Dr. Aparaajita Pandey, una experta en relaciones internacionales con enfoque en América Latina. A very good evening to you, Dr. Aparaajita. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? And hola, everyone.
Hola, okay. So, bueno, Dr. Aparaajita sabe hablar español, pero no domina muy bien, así que esta entrevista vamos a hacer en inglés. Let me introduce you, ma'am, to our public. Actualmente empleada en capacidad de profesor asistente en el Departamento de Políticas Públicas de la Universidad de Amity, Noida. Ella es responsable de dar clases a los estudiantes que cursan maestría en políticas públicas y administración. También, doctora Aparaajita es responsable de supervisarlos a través de sus disertaciones de maestría. Trabajó como pasante de investigación en el Consejo Indio de Asuntos Mundiales, un grupo de expertos en política exterior para el gobierno de la India, y fue responsable de producir resúmenes, artículos, informes y ensayos periódicos relacionados con las implicaciones de la política exterior para la región de América Latina y el Caribe. También fue invitada por la Universidad de Anton de Com en Paramaribo, en Surinam, para impartir clases en calidad de profesora invitada para estudiantes de maestría en Relaciones Internacionales y Ciencias Políticas. Fue otorgada el doctorado en noviembre de 2020 con el tema de dinámica de la cooperación energética en América del Sur desde la década de 1990. Como interés tiene política exterior, política pública, geopolítica, energía, seguridad y política energética. Así que muchísimas gracias, Dr. Aparaajita. Thank you very much for coming on this YouTube channel and giving your time for us.
Thank you so much for having me. And that was quite an introduction. I feel like I should just shorten it a bit. But thank you so much.
It's an absolute privilege to have you amongst us. And I'm sure that the public that watches this YouTube channel will go away having learned quite a lot about Latin America and international relations over there. So let me start the interview, Dr. Aparaajita, by asking you, what was the first thing that got you interested in foreign policy?
So I actually did my bachelor's in history. I did a history honors from Delhi University, from Hindu College. And at that point of time, I remember I wanted to be a civil servant for my country. And like a lot of people in India do. And I was talking to this friend of mine, and she wanted to pursue international relations. And when you're in your last year of your bachelor's, and we were giving exams for our masters, and I just thought, you know, why shouldn't I study international relations? I like politics. I like how countries interact with each other. I like listening to politicians, and as it is, I want to be a diplomat someday. So this adds to my profile. And when I was in bachelor's, I had made up my mind that this is all I'm going to do. This is the end of my academics. I am never going to study more. So obviously that didn't happen. Oh. So I did give an exam for Jawaharlal Nehru University. It's a national level exam, and I happened to crack it. And I was always interested in politics. I was always interested in how global politics and economics worked. So when I cracked the international relations exam, it was a prestigious thing to do. And everyone around me was so excited that I thought, oh, I must have done something right. And I came here, took the first class, and I was hooked. And I think my interest in international relations as a discipline grew manifold once I was privileged enough to be taught by such great professors. So I would really owe about 80% of what I am to my professors. So yeah, that's how I got. And when you were studying international relations, we had a class about foreign policy formulation and how it worked. And I just found it the most interesting part of it all, about the theory and everything. So that's how I got interested. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So your journey started off by learning history, and then from history moving on to international relations. So
I do feel like that helped me a lot because I had a sound background as to why things were happening the way they were happening. So anytime I studied something from a political science perspective, I could go back to my roots in history and see, oh, this was happening at that point of time. That's why this event has taken place. So even to my students, I always say that whenever you're studying a current event, always go back and see what happened in history that inspired it. So it just makes more sense and you can build linkages.
Absolutely. I think that that's a very good way of relating history with foreign policy. So my next question, Dr. Aprajita, would be, why did you choose to specialize your foreign policy studies in Latin America? What was it that drew you towards that region?
Okay, so in India, sadly, I feel like that's a similar situation in Latin America and the Caribbean. We don't have a lot of people pursuing Latin American studies. We don't have a lot of students. At the same time, we don't have a lot of centers teaching it. So when I was doing my master's, I was fortunate enough to be exposed to a lot of areas, a lot of different regions in my second year of master's. So I was studying the foreign policy of Israel, something about Latin America, the US, China, and we had different regions of the world. Again, I had a brilliant professor. So I studied under her for 2 semesters. And I realized that this is a region, Latin America and the Caribbean is a region that that is a whole entire continent that we have overlooked. No one is ready to study it, and nobody wants to put in the effort that they want to put in to China, that they want to put into the US, that they want to put into Russia, the Middle East, or West Asia, as we would call it. And I just felt like that's unfair to the region. At the same time, I felt that there were more opportunities when it came to Latin America. I felt like if I wanted to pursue higher studies, if I wanted to go for a field trip, if I wanted to get a job there, I mean, speaking as a student, speaking as a 22-year-old, my core focus was getting a job, right? My core focus was my academics and my career prospects. And I just felt like these are 33 countries that we are overlooking, and nobody is looking at it. Everybody wanted to study China, and people should study what they want to study. Even I am studying China now. Studying that is the world now. Everybody's a China expert. But so the combination of having really good professors and at the same time realizing that this is an entirely overlooked region which has so much to offer, it just made me feel like this was the right choice for me. So I gravitated towards it almost organically, and then decided to pursue an MPhil and a PhD in Latin America.
Okay, fascinating. So, Dr. Prajita, how have US and Latin American foreign policies historically been, and how do you see them having evolved over a period of time?
Okay, if we talk about history, so when we talk about the US, when the point is that we can't mention South America without the US, and US without its, without the southern part of it. I don't like to use that term, but the Americans use it. America's backyard, as they would say. A lot of it, the US Latin America relation, a lot of it depends or has been formed on the basis of Monroe Doctrine. The basic pillar of the American foreign policy, the fact that they wouldn't let any armed threat happen in the entire Western Hemisphere. And while they haven't done so much for Canada or the northern part of it, they have certainly intervened a lot in towards their southern neighbors. So that has always been, the kind of focal point of everything that the US does. Um, during the Cold War, again, it was a very interesting time for most South American countries and most recently independent countries in the world, because they could play the Soviets against the Americans, and they could actually use it to their advantage if they were smart enough to do it, and if they were powerful enough to do it. Powerful in, I mean, for some countries, independence meant complete chaos. For others, it meant opportunities. For Latin America, it has been a mixed bag. So the US constantly being obsessed with Latin America, Russia trying to intervene in it, and also these countries trying to build their own identity. Um, an interaction of these three factors is what I see when I see US and Latin America, their foreign policies interacting with each other. And you can't study Latin America without American intervention in it, whether it is the OAS, whether it is Bay of Pigs, whether it is what they did in Colombia, whether it is the kind of politics we see from authoritarian Latin American presidents, Jair Bolsonaro completely emulating Trump, or Nayib Bukele now looking at Nicaragua, now backing, shifting from Taiwan to Beijing, just as sort of a reaction to US commenting on the fairness of their elections. So they have a constant interaction with each other, and they will continue to do so because of their geographical proximity. You cannot geographically separate yourself or distance yourself from the US. So you will constantly be in sort of an unequal relationship with them. So that is what I see as the foreign policy interaction between these two places. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Prajita. My next question would be closer to our own space, and that is India. And would like to know your views about the how do the U.S. Latin American relations impact India, if in any way, and how do you view uh, India and Latin America and their relations?
Okay, so let me take the India Latin America part first. We keep saying Latin America, but we can't forget the Caribbean. We have very deep, very old diaspora linkage with the Caribbean. So whether it's islands like Trinidad and Tobago, or places like Suriname, Guyana, Jamaica, all of these places have a very large Indian origin population, and populations that have now over the past decades gained considerable amount of political clout. So they're not populations of just immigrants. They're populations of incredibly powerful and rich immigrants. So that plays a role. Certainly, what happens with Latin America and India is that we talk a lot about the potential. Somehow it never materializes. But notwithstanding what I've said, I still feel that we have large potential to go forward. But what we have done in the past years cannot be neglected. We are a big part of their pharmaceutical industry, their automobile industry, their agricultural industry, um, and now we are TCS, which is one of the biggest Indian companies in Latin America. It employs a whole bunch of people from Latin America, from different countries in the region, and they have overcome the language barrier. That is the biggest barrier that we face with the region, that we are English speaking people and they speak Spanish. And as I think I'm the biggest example sitting here on your channel speaking in English. But they did manage to overcome that. We have had successful ITech scholarships also. And I feel like there is a big potential when it comes to energy. There's a big potential when it comes to people to people contact. When it comes to agriculture, we have similar climatic conditions. We have similar diets. At least our ingredients are similar. India is always in a need for a stable, reliable energy partner. We've never had relations that have been less than cordial. We've had nice, stable relations with Latin American countries. We've not had historical disputes. The only problem with India and Latin America is that there is a physical distance, which in our minds we are not able to overcome. So the geographical distance that we perceive as such a big obstacle, we sort of never overcame that. But now we are doing much better. We've seen the number of high-level visits that have happened. I believe there were visits from the Colombian ministers. Our own minister, Mr. Shankar, went to visit the region. Our vice president has been to that region, which I feel, and in close proximity to each other. So these number of diplomatic dialogues, this increasing frequency of high-level visits, is surely going to translate into better relations. Also, we have a good niche in Latin America. Right now the market is dominated by China and the US, and both of these countries, not to simplify anything, though they come with very deep pockets, when it comes to looking at partners without ulterior motives, India proves to be the first name that comes up. So we have a very nice opportunity for creating a niche for ourselves in the defense sector, in the energy sector, in foreign investment, in pharmaceuticals, automobiles, agriculture, all of that, and also people to people contact. We have enough soft power to get that done. So I feel like we have a lot more potential to grow. But how we are going, if we keep going steadily, it should be a changed picture in another decade or so.
Right. Right. And yeah, I would like you to also answer the second part of the question, that was that
Oh yeah,
how do you view the US Latin American relationship? How does that impact the relationship between India and Latin America?
I really don't think that the US Latin America relationship impacts the Indian approach towards Latin America too much. When we look at Latin America, we look at it from the point of view of South-South cooperation.
Mhm.
We are not trying to play some major strategic game here. You know, um, the point that I was making earlier, the geographical distance, while it is a problem, uh, the good thing about it is that there is very little strategic game to play. They're so far away from us. This is not the Indian Ocean where we have Philippines and China and militarization and Russia above us. It's an entirely different hemisphere.
Right.
And we've never had problems with them. We don't have security threats from Latin America per se. So whatever we are doing is purely economic, it is purely political, it is pure cooperation. And that's why the whole US Latin America dynamics does not play into it. Neither has US tried to use it against us. So because that is not a concern for any of the three parties involved. They have a separate relationship with us. They have a separate relationship with the US. And similarly, for the US, they have a separate relationship with us. Our goals from each of the region are very different. Our targets from each of the region are very different. So there's no permutation combination looking at there's no balance act to maintain.
Okay.
So we can go ahead and have a relationship that we want with Latin America, and US is not going to be a problem.
Right. Right. Okay. So, Dr. Prajita, my next question is, we have seen historically countries in South America being ruled by dictators, and dictatorship has been a very integral part of the Latin American history. However, we see that over the years, democracy has tried to make its presence felt in the region. So, how do you see the role of democracy in Latin America over the last many decades and currently?
Okay. Uh, Let me take a minute with that answer. Okay. So when you say we've seen dictatorships in Latin America and we see democracy in Latin America, I feel that it is very important to not look at that entire region as a monolith. If we look at the current political composition of the region, you have Chile, which is right now drafting a new constitution completely, and their drafting body is being headed by a professor who comes from Mapuche origins. So that's an indigenous person,
Right.
a woman who is a professor, trying being the head of the drafting committee of a constitution of a country that for the longest time was a neoliberal stable economy running on a constitution that was made by a dictator. So the point is that the countries in the region might not have the kind of democratic history that India has. We were a democratic country since day one. Since the day our constitution began, we gave universal adult franchise. We didn't have that problem of women not voting or certain communities not voting. And we were incredibly lucky to have that sort of political stability, and we still are very politically stable as a country. When we talk about Latin America, you see that they have had oscillations all across the spectrum. Brazil was a military rule till 1985. They've had a history of people being tortured. There are death squads when it comes to Chile, when it comes to Argentina, the military junta. So that was the past. They have all brushed with these authoritarian regimes. I think we also have to see that in the context of the fact that there is also a history of racial divide, which presents itself. The fact that you have the peninsulares, the fact that you have people of a certain color who are associated with political elites or who are associated with great economic wealth. And it was never seen in the society that they would ever have to lose that position of having immense amount of social capital. So for countries or for nations to fight that history and then become democratic, and not just democratic in the terms of electing a person that you like, but actually having a democratized society, actually giving representation to all communities. I think that's a long and arduous journey, but it is happening in countries. I mean, Argentina legalizing abortions is something that is almost unthinkable. The Pope is Argentinian, you know. So the change is happening, but at the same time, when we look at Central America and we see Daniel Ortega, we see Bukele, we see Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro refuses to fall. So you see both the extremes in one region. And the whole concept of pink tide, every time there's an election cycle, somebody will come and say, oh, this is the pink tide. Oh, it is starting, or oh, it is ending. It's not that easy. You have to study these regions. You have to study the economic conditions,
Right.
the prevalent administrative practices, and what the people want. So what I see right now is something that was pointed out by some scholars also, which is the rise of what they have, not my words, but what they have termed as the millennial left, which basically means it is a workforce that wants certain social security, that wants that if they are working hard and have studied hard and taken debt to become students and gain higher education, they want it to translate into jobs. They want women to be safe. They want rights for the LGBTQIA community. They want rights for women. They don't want such high crime rates. And they're up for it. And at this point of time, in most places, they don't care what is the history of the politician. I mean, Peru electing a farmer who is also somewhat associated with the Shining Path at one point of time. At least he's accused of being associated with that. Or Gabriel Boric being elected, who is a 35-year-old man. Or these things, Bolivia electing Luis Arce, who is an indigenous man, quite like Evo Morales, right after Evo Morales was accused of holding on to power. I think people have realized that they want change and they want a certain kind of country. And for that, they don't need to look at the racial, economic, political, religious background of the politician. They want to look at what the politician is going to do, what his manifesto says, what is the kind of rhetoric he uses. So that is what I see right now. For countries that are still authoritarian, I feel like people are yet to reach that point. In international relations, in peace and conflict, there is something that I would borrow from most theorists. There's a concept of there's a phenomena of ripeness of conflict. which means that it has to be ripe enough for the conflict to happen, and then it will be resolved. So I feel that countries that are still authoritarian, maybe they haven't reached, at least the people haven't reached that ripeness. And once they do, they will ask for change. That's how I see democracy in Latin America.
Okay, thank you. That's a very interesting take on pretty vast topic in terms of the history of dictatorship and democracy. And I think very rightly pointed out by you that we should not look at the region from any one single narrative or prism, and it has to be looked at from multiple angles. So, Dr. Aprajita, I would like to take you back to relations between Latin America and India, as you quite rightly pointed out at the beginning of your interview that unfortunately the region of Latin America for Indians has been something that has not been explored quite a lot, and people here do not know a lot about Latin America. It could be because of the physical distance that exists between the regions. So, and hence, it's a wonderful opportunity for me to ask you if you can enlighten the public who is watching this interview as to which Latin American countries do have strong relations with India currently, and which countries do you think in that region have the potential for growth in relations between India and those countries in future?
I think when we look at relations with any country or any region, specific, especially when it is not strategic in nature, we tend to look at it from an economic point of view because that is the most easily quantifiable. So for any sort of private sector investor, um, a country that ensures returns on his or her profit, that ensures returns on his or her investment, is the country that's most valuable. You know, so and when we look at it politically, we have to see countries that have had lasting relations with India. So Brazil being the biggest country in the region, also being a part of BRICS, it becomes important. Argentina being a part of Mercosur, we already have a preferential trade agreement both with Argentina and Chile. We have direct bilateral relations with Brazil. We are right now investing a lot in Guyana, in Paramaribo, in Suriname. Paraguay has found a natural gas field, which apparently is estimated to be bigger than the Bolivian gas field. So countries that have a potential of being economic giants will certainly be the biggest countries that we have strong relations with. Okay. Otherwise, this is not to say that we we prefer some countries over the other. I mean, it's not as simplistic as that. Let me preface by saying all of this. Also, whatever I say with an academic caveat. So please go easy. Countries like countries of the Caribbean where we have diaspora linkages, again, places which offer some amount of soft power. Mexico being so close to the US, even though Mexicans don't consider themselves strictly Latin, but I think that's a debate for another time. That all those places that are economically viable, that have tourism potential, that have diaspora linkages, and that feel like they're going to be big economic giants in the future, even though they might be going through some sort of economic recession at this point of time, are what we should look at uh, as potential partners for India in the future. I feel that it is the same from that side. You know, they're also looking at India as a potential economic partner. They're also looking at India as a place where they can sell their oil and gas and goods. So the buses that run in Delhi are from an Argentinian company. Um, Demerara sugar comes from Guyana, from the banks of Demerara River. So all of these things will happen, and these things on the down low have been happening for a very long time. They've just never gained enough significant. They've never been in the highlight enough for people to know about it. So that's what I would say. And I think going forward, things like medical tourism, things like actual tourism as it is, soft power. Brazil is incredibly interested in the kind of TV and films we have, and there is sort of I was fortunate enough to visit or teach at Paramaribo, the university, and I believe that when I went there, they were quite surprised that I wasn't dressed the way Indian TV serial women are dressed. So there is some amount of fascination for Bollywood, which I feel is around the world, but it is there also. So when those things are explored, yoga, which again is a big point that India is already selling. We have Indian cultural centers there. So when those things are explored, there is again a potential for greater people-to-people contact.
Well, you have, in a way, Dr. Prajita, answered the next question that I had, the final question for this interview, which is related.
No, I think I can add more to it. So please go ahead and ask that question.
Yes, yes. So, in fact, although you come with a background of international relations and politics and public policy, but would like your take on how, because our channel goes very big on culture. So would like to end this interview by asking you about how do you see culture playing a role in relations between India and Latin America?
Okay, like you said, so with the background of IR, we sort of have this penchant for evaluating everything on the economics and political side. But culture, actually, I was quite surprised to know about it, to learn about it recently. That we've had very long long historical cultural linkages with the region. Gitanjali has already been translated into Spanish and Portuguese 40 years ago. You know, Pablo Neruda's work has been translated into many Indian languages. There is actually an entire book that was translated by the native indigenous women in Madhya Pradesh. That was the works of the native indigenous women of certain communities in the Amazon. So it has not even been translated into Hindi. So these linkages have the kind of linkages that marginalized communities have formed. Che Guevara's tales have been translated into literature that our students study. The kind of ideological linkages that people have had right now, the revolution or the protest, whatever you want to call it, that happened in Chile for the new constitution, that is being extensively studied by students of political science in India, because it is probably the only revolution in the recent times that has led to a new constitutional formation. And this new constitution is being formed. I mean, the success of it will be assessed in later years. But the way they're forming it, the fact that they have women and marginalized communities and the underprivileged all being a part of the formulation body, is something that is being studied in India, because it is a great moment for political science, and it would be studied later in history 50, 100, 70 years from now. An entire chain of bookstores I believe, in Mexico, if not other countries, at least in Mexico, which is called Gandhi. So popular figures who have brought about significant change, women who have written about their atrocities, their suppression, communities that have written about their atrocities and suppression, people who brought about change within political ideologies, are all studied in both regions. So cultural literature, art have already formed the linkage, much before politics and economics got wind of it. So I feel that if I wouldn't say exploit, but if we build upon that foundation, if we build upon the people-to-people contact, if we have better contact, we don't have any direct flights, you know. So if we have better contact, if we don't look at the language difference as a barrier that cannot be overcome, if we study about Latin American history in our schools, in our colleges, it's certainly something that can be built upon, and it could be a great foundation for better political and economic relations between these regions. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Aparaajita, for sharing your views about Latin America and India. And I hope that the viewers have got a much better understanding about Latin America and the countries that are there. Muchísimas gracias, Dr. Aparaajita Pandey. Hasta el nuevo capítulo de Español por Dentro. Por favor, dale un me gusta, suscríbete y por favor comparte este video con vuestros amigos. Muchas gracias. Hasta.
Thank you so much for having me. Muchas gracias. Thank you.
Chao.